Welcome back, MTG Joe here. Today we're going to be doing another installment of the weekly meta breakdown where we look at the top performing decks on the MTG Arena ladder. Normally we split up the videos between best of 1 and best of 3 for each of the respective formats. With the data available today, because it's only been about a week since Explore Anthology 2 came out and hit Explore, we're going to cover both in this video. So we're going to be looking at the first week of data in terms of the new Explore Anthology cards, what's made the biggest impact, where the meta's kind of shifted, what decks are doing the best right now. And we're looking with the data from MTGA, which you see on the screen. Companion tool that runs alongside your Arena client, whole bunch of cool functionality, win rate tracking, collection syncing, in-game overlays. Link is in the description down below if you want to get started today for free on a bunch of that. And I'll post all these deck lists in the video description if you do want to just pull them into Arena, get started, and play with that. So we're going to be taking a look. This is December 13th through to the 19th. Diamond to Mythic Rank. In Best of 1, we have 12,000 games played. I wanted to kind of go into here. I was looking at Platinum to Mythic, and there were still just a lot of kind of old decks in a way. No new cards being played, so we want to kind of cover it. And the biggest kind of winner of the week is Mono Green Devotion. And we're going to see some varied devotion strategies with Nykthos Shrine to Nyx in the format. So this allows you to create an obscene amount of mana with the deck. This particular deck is one of the top decks in Pioneer. We're missing Oath of Nisa, which is a 1-mana enchantment that lets you dig for either a land or Planeswalker in the top 4 cards, I think. 4 or 5 cards. So it kind of fuels the deck here. So what you're trying to do with this deck, you have 8 elves on 1, Wolf Willow Haven, and what you're trying to do is ramp up ahead, use Kiora to be able to tap on tap stuff, and what you want to do is get a bunch of green pips in your mana base. This version's a little bit interesting because you don't usually see Steel Leaf Champion or Elder Gargaroth in these lists. Typically it's 4 of Lovestruck Beast as kind of the default, and then there's some modifications along the way. You have Adventurous Impulse here as a way to dig to find lands or creatures, ways to just basically find your Nykthos. And what you want to try to do with the deck is use Kiora, tap on tap, generate a whole bunch of mana with the Nykthos out, use Karn for a Wishboard style package. Notably in Best of 1 you only have 7 spell targets, and I'll make mention at the bottom, this is not the best 7 that they have here. So we're going to kind of look at 2 lists to kind of gear it up there. There's a number of other ways. So you have stuff like Cavalier of Thorns, helps you dig for your Nykthos, fuels your graveyard to help you find copies of Storm the Festival, pulls a land into play untapped as well, so you could kind of chain multiple Shrine to Nyx together, adds 3 devotion to itself, so could potentially cost as little as 2 mana to cast. Old Growth Troll, Elvish Mystics, Llanowar Elves, they're all free when you cast them with the Nykthos out, because you get the mana back anyways. A couple copies of Nisa and Storm the Festival on the top end. Now, the sideboards kind of build your own adventure, but there's certain cards you should be playing, especially for Best of 1. And notably, I don't like this configuration because Bankbuster's too slow for Best of 1. You're not going to be grinding it out. You're unlikely to combo out in the format here. So how this kind of works with Restorative Burst, if you're able to generate 15 or 16 mana, I think it is, have a Kiora and a Karn on the battlefield, Kiora and Karn in your graveyard, you could effectively fetch the Pestilence Cauldron, cast the backside, which is Restorative Burst, gain 4 life, get back your other 2 Planeswalkers, basically untap, tap the Nykthos again, recast the Karn gets back the Restorative Burst in your exile zone, because it's from outside of play, so even if it's exiled, Karn could still get it. You basically repeat this process as many times as you want, gain an indiscriminate amount of life, and you could win that way there by just out life gaining. Typically, these decks will also play Treasure Vault in the sideboard because it's the land that can be fetched. The Treasure Vault can create black mana, so then that'll allow you to cast Pestilence Cauldron, and then you can mill your opponent out based on the life you gained that turn. It's a lot of clicking involved. Oftentimes, I would say in Best of 1, your configuration should be more aligned to this here. So Tormund's Crypt is instant speed exile, so think your Greasefang matchups. Pithing Needle is good against like Teferi. You could needle and name creature lands. You can name vehicles, planeswalkers, basically anything that's not a mana ability. So just a flexible card there. Stonebrain is decent against kind of your opponent's decks. You can keep getting Stonebrains back from exile with Karn, so you can kind of strip them of their win conditions. Pretty useful card there. Sky Sovereign, just really good against Rakdos decks, can pick up on the creature decks, stuff like that. God Pharaoh's Statue's attacks effect and also drains your opponent. Cityscape Leveler is just general removal that can be brought back from the graveyard, a good body on its own. And there's a couple kind of considerations. So Portal to Phyrexia is the cool one. Get your opponent to sacrifice, stuff like that. I actually don't mind playing in this slot either Karn Silex. It's the 3 mana artifact that's basically a board wipe that you can pump mana into. Angels is more prevalent in Best of 1, as well as more creature-based aggro, and that's a good way to answer those types of decks. You're probably not going to be getting it, but Chariot's an okay selection as well. So this is kind of more the stock list you'd see. I'll paste both the deck lists for you to kind of configure. This one's got a slightly lower win rate percentage right now. The Gargaroths are good. I can see them being useful in Best of 1, blocks Greasefang, Parhelion pretty well, but I think this sideboard configuration is a lot better. And we'll look at the full sideboard when we get the Best of 3 version. The next deck in Best of 1, Mono Red Burn, deck that makes me happy. So this version here, we got Eidolon of the Great Rebels, 2 mana, symmetrical whenever a player, so you or your opponent, casts a spell with 3 CMC or less, the Eidolon deals 2 damage to that player. So it's just a way to kind of repeatedly ping your opponent. Lots of burn in the deck, play with fires, Bone Crusher Giant Stomps, Skewer the Critics, Lightning Strikes mixed in there. The Chain Whirlers are actually really good against the opponent elf strategies. Clear out those blockers, get some off the Devotion. Phoenix Chick. So I was asked a couple questions when I played Mono Red Burn in Best 3. Why Phoenix Chick over Soulscar Mage? If you see with a lot of the decks, Mono Green's very popular. They gum up the board very quickly. It's not unusual for them to go turn 2. Here's a 5/5 or a 4/4. Your Soulscar Mage can't really attack in. And shrinking down those creatures when you can't kill them doesn't really work in that case because they still generate the Devotion. You need them clear off the board. Now, Phoenix Chick is evasive, can go over fly over pretty much everything in that deck except for the Cavaliers. And it just gets you those chip points of damage. Against Mono Green, you got to get whatever points of damage you can, because if it goes to the late game, they're going to win that game every single time. Spikefield Hazard, people were saying, I never cast this as a spell. I'm always using it as a land. Or sorry, I'm never casting this as a Spikefield. So I'll replace it with another spell. Well, it doesn't really work like that because these are really lands with the upside of being spells. So you want to have this as just, in case you flood, you have a lot of utility. So you see there's only 12 lands that don't do anything really. Ramanap if you flood, Den of the Bugbear if you flood, Sokuzan if you flood. Spikefield can be used early as well. It's another 1 mana spell that also happens to be a land that can hit elves on curve to take them out if your opponent is on the play. You don't want them to go elf into Old Growth Troll. You're going to have a hard time there. And then lastly, your card advantage engine is the Chandras, as well as the light up the stages in this deck. Then we have Mono White Humans, another popular choice. The card that they got in this set is Brave the Elements. So choose a color. White creatures you control gain protection of that from that color on the turn. So against Mono Green, it's basically unblockable. So that's why you've seen some of the decks. So this version here, they can't block it. The notable version with this, the Lovestruck Beast, Heart's Desire casts a 1/1 white human creature. So this actually does allow you to have a blocker in place. So just a notable thing when doing kind of the math. But it's kind of a human tribal deck. You have stuff like Recruitment Officer that can be card advantage, a whole bunch of 1-drops that get bigger, Luminarch Aspirant to pump the team, Thalia's Lieutenant to pump the team, add a line to go wide. Your removal is basically Brutal Cathar. And then Extraction Specialist has some nice interaction with stuff like Thalia's Lieutenant that could come back, or with Dauntless Bodyguard for protection. You also have the addition of Mutavault, a new creature land that can act as a human. So notably, you may want to activate it, and then before you play Thalia's Lieutenant, you can put counters on it as well. So some utility there. Again, just having lands that do stuff in case you flood. Chefnet Dunes can pump up the team. Castle Ardenvale makes a bunch of creatures as well. And not enough for stats. I can't tell you how good it is, but if you want to have some fun, Mono Black Devotion. So this is another Nykthos Shrine to Nyx deck, but you are using a Yara for Devotion, Gifted Aetherborn, Tymaret, Yarix Fenlurker, Warlock's Class, just a bunch of kind of cool ways there. Grey Merchant of Asphodel. So is it great? Probably not. Is it fun? It's got Gary in it. Yes, it's fun. You got Gary and Vito. You can't get better than that. And then just a bunch of utility lands kind of mixed in there. Because we don't have the stats, I'm not going to go like deep dive in this, but Mono Black Devotion is always a fun deck. So for best of 3, we've only had 9,000 matches. Mono Green, again, the highest win rate. Everything else doesn't have enough games played to get us a stat yet, but 57% win rate. We can see the full sideboard here, but I'm actually going to pivot. So this past weekend, there was the Pizza Box Open Explorer. 112 players played, free-to-play cash tournament. I actually commentated the top 8, and it was a really cool tournament. We got a lot of good stats from it, good representation. So we can go through, you can see all these deck lists. These are all best of 3. There's a number of 7-1 lists, and then we have the top 8 cut. You can go through. I'm not going to spoil who won, but you can watch the video. There's a full top 8 gameplay on my channel if you want to take a look at that. But these are all the decks that went well. But I want to actually scroll down to this section here. So this is the breakdown of the format. So the most represented deck was Rakdos Midrange at 16 copies, about 15% of the field, just under. Had terrible record. Rakdos, everybody brought it. Rakdos is very bad into Mono Green. 1934, 34% win rate. Azorius Control was actually a good meta call for this tournament. So Azorius has a positive matchup against both the humans decks, like the creature decks, and the green decks, as well as angels. It's so-so against Rakdos, but the mono green decks pushed out Rakdos. Azorius was able to beat up on a lot of the mono green decks. A little bit hard to see here, but you have mono green ramp, mono green combo, mono green planeswalkers. They just were poorly listed here. But we have a 6 and 7, 12 and 13, and 26 and 22. So the creature aggro decks came to attack mono green pretty well, and then the Azorius control decks. All in all, it was a pretty level meta, which was nice to see. The Angel decks actually had the highest win rate, and now Angel has a really bad matchup into blue-white control, just having access to sweepers, lots of cheap removal, stuff like that. Decent matchup into Rakdos. It's not the best, it's not the worst. Rakdos has a hard time dealing 4 damage to some things. They have like Stomp and stuff like that. Doesn't really do too much there. Their sweepers, if they do bring it in, sometimes they're Extinction Vent. You can usually outpace them in life gain and get some value there. One of these Selesnya decks was actually mono white Angels. That was a Devotion build. I'll show that one in a sec because that list was really cool. So there we have those stats. Mono red was about 50%. We had one player have a pretty good run. Interestingly though, Spirits had a really tough matchup. While they have a really good matchup against mono green, it'd be interesting to see if they just ran into like Control or Rakdos or some of the more creature heavy decks. Another deck that like Rakdos Sacrifice, 2 and 9, pretty poor showing there. The mono white decks, 14 and 11, 56%, so not terrible there as well. There was, probably won't show here, is that mono black control? Smaller sample sizes, but Enigmatic was the deck. 12 games for it, but we had a good showing with that. So you see the mono white humans deck, the Enigmatic Incarnation deck. This is something I played on my channel if you're interested as well. See a demo. Basically, you got the printing of Nylea's Presence. Let's open this in a new window. Show you that one. So Nylea's Presence here. Oh, I'm sorry. I don't like the interface here. So it is 2 mana, enchant a land, you get to draw a card, and it turns basically domain on all the land types. So with this Nylea's Presence, you can cast Leyline Binding for 1 mana in this deck. And what you're trying to do is play a toolbox deck. So you have both Fires of Invention to cast stuff for free, 2 spells per turn, and then you have Enigmatic Incarnation that you can sack an enchantment and then go get a creature with CMC 1 more from your deck. So with Leyline Binding, you cast it for 1, but you get to sack it to get a 7 drop. So you can get Titan of Industry, Coma, or Agent of Treachery. You got a Blink package with Yorion and Fable the Mirror Breaker, and a lot of cool like interaction 1-of stuff like that. It's not a cheap deck in terms of wild cards, but it's a fun deck. We also had Boros Aggro that did pretty solid here. This was a Prowess deck, and this was another good meta call. Mono green doesn't answer stuff. So if you're thinking of decks that are fragile to removal and your opponents are bringing decks without removal, so Angel sucks against sweepers. This Prowess deck that's looking to use stuff like Prowess Heroic deck, Favored Hoplite, 10th District Legionnaire, Illuminator Virtuoso. His deck's not very good into like heavy fatal pushes, heavy removal. But without them doing anything, you're able to just kind of pump through a whole bunch of damage. And then lastly, I want to find the... Yeah, this was the deck. There's a bunch of mono green ramp decks. If you want to see the configuration, stuff like that, jump in. There's a whole bunch of great data here to see what's working, what's not. Selesnya, they call this Selesnya Angels, but it should be mono white angels. So this is a Mutavault Nykthos deck. And what you're trying to do is actually, you have Book of the Exalted Deeds with the Mutavault. So if you think of the old Faceless Haven deck, but now you don't have to play the Snowlands. You can play these Mutavaults. It's cheaper to activate. So you can basically do it. You can activate the Mutavault with the mana for itself. So that pays for itself already. And then the Book of Exalted Deeds could come down. So you can do this as early as turn 4 and lock your opponent out of the game if they don't have an answer to any of the Mutavaults. So then they just can't win the game. It also adds 3 devotion and plays nicely just with the life gain that you're gaining in the deck anyways. You also have Kyla's Reconstruction, which is just like a big mana Coco. You can fuel a bunch of mana from the Nykthos into it to dig like X amount of cards, or put X amount of creatures with mana value X or less from the top 7 cards. So a pretty big payoff in that respect. A lot of these white decks also brought laydown arms. So we saw this both out of the white-based decks, humans and angels decks, as well as the blue-white control decks. We're starting to bring copies of laydown arms, just as a flexible removal spell with the exile condition. And then lastly, I just want to see what this Jeskai control deck is. Oh, this was the Transmogrify deck to get cheat into play Agents of Treacheries. You have mono red aggro, mono red burn, so a couple of versions of that. So you have to go through the list, see what interests you, stuff of that nature. Is this devotion? So mono black control is using Corrupt as the win con, as well as Invoke Despair. And then just a whole bunch of removal. So removal.deck. Sheoldred's in there. And then no Karn. But a copy of Stonebrain. So this is just really heavily leveraged off the Sheoldreds as your win conditions, and then Corrupts to be huge burn spells along with the Invoke Despairs. So a lot of great data here. If you're interested, like I said, in seeing the top 8 coverage of this tournament, I have it on my YouTube. If you're interested in playing in future events, I'll link it. So Hollywood Pizza hosts these. I commentate some. There's a bunch of other great content creators that commentate in these. He does 3 a month. The next one will be in January. So the Explorers later on, but he does Standard Explorer and Explorer, depending on the week. So I'll link the thing to the full schedule. They're free to join. There's cash prizes for all of these. They're played on MTG Melee. It's a really good time, really smooth tournament. If you want to sample, like I said, see what the tournaments are like, I have the top 8 on my channel. But let me know what you've been enjoying. I've been really liking Explorer. It's been really fun. I've been playing not too much, but I tried the enigmatic decks. Elves was a little rough. We ran into Witch's Vengeance decks. The burn deck's really fun. I built it in best of 3 and just really going Burning Hands, Roiling Vortex heavy. Nykthos decks are really solid as well. I haven't played a huge amount, but it's been fun when I have played and from what I've watched and consumed. But let me know what you've been playing in the comments. We'll try to get Historic out before the holidays, probably take a break over the holidays themselves, rest and relax, and come back with some more content after that. Appreciate everyone stopping by. If you do enjoy this type of content, greatly appreciate if you could like and comment. If you haven't done so, hit that subscribe button. Free, doesn't cost you anything. I'm closing in on 7,000 subs. It'd be really awesome to hit that before the end of the year. But we'll catch you next time. Thanks for watching, everyone. Hope you have a great one, and stay safe out there.